Chapter 4. A Grip Like Iron. Betray not the darkness to the light. Seek to please thy noble master. Take not less than is thy right, lest death come seek thee after. Look at me, apprentice. I asked you a question. Ferran tore his tired eyes away from the 3 tenets carved into the wall and faced the guildmaster. De Guerin's bright blue eyes pinned him from underneath strands of long black hair. When Ferran didn't immediately answer, he repeated, "Did you do the job?" Sitting beside Ferran, Cynic chimed in, "We did. Cleared out the safe and burned it all to the ground." The guildmaster silenced him with a pointed finger. "Not you." His gaze continued to bore into Ferran, who itched to be looking anywhere else, at anything else besides those mad eyes. Finally he replied, "It's done. And what was your contribution? How many tasks did you burden dear Cynic with, rather than shouldering them yourself?" Cynic, loud as ever, interceded again. "Oh, he was very helpful. Instrumental, even. Couldn't have done it without him, in fact." De Guerin maintained a level gaze. "While I admire your readiness to lie to get what you want, I don't appreciate when you lie to me, so I'll hear it from his own mouth, if it's the same to you." Cynic burned the stable, Ferran admitted, and cleared the safe. "So then you did nothing." It wasn't a question. "No, I barred the door, found the deed." "And yet you didn't light the fire." "No." De Guerin's eyes could have lit wet tinder. "Our contract was simple, Ferran. Burn the stable, kill the beasts, destroy the deed, and loot the safe. That's what I'm being paid for, and what I'm paying you for. And yet, instead of finishing the job I gave you, you yoked the burden upon your friend again." "Well, either way," Cynic cut in, "job's done. There'll be no more competition for Beharon." De Guerin responded only with a moment of silence, but it was enough. Cynic fell quiet. "You didn't light the fire." "I couldn't do it," Ferran admitted. "There it is," De Guerin said. "And why couldn't you do it?" Ferran shrugged, looking back at the ground. "Look at me," the master demanded. "I saved your life, apprentice. Your soul belongs to me. Your very actions are my property, and I will not allow you to shirk your contracts by hiding behind the lie of morality." Finally, he broke away his withering gaze, slamming a palm on the ancient wooden table. "I will free you from this childish sense of right and—" He looked down for a moment, breathing hard. No, I cannot show you more favors. Not when others have been discarded for displaying the same weakness." Cynic cut in. "Master, he is improving. To kill him would be a waste." "What use," De Guerin said, "is a slave who will not obey? What do you profit me if you cannot stand on your own? For years I've nurtured you, nourished you, and for years you've skirted my requirements, refusing to grow. If not for Cynic carrying your weight, I would have killed you long ago." "Honestly," Cynic said, "I think I'm wearing him down. Soon enough I'll be throwing grannies down wells and stealing the wheels off carriages." De Guerin's eyes flicked between Ferran and Cynic for a quiet moment before speaking. "There is no room for conscience among my apprentices. I want to make it clear that while I admire you, Cynic, even love you, you lower yourself in my eyes by defending this boy." He forestalled protests with a hand. "Even so, you are among the most profitable of my slaves, so know that I'm being honest with you, sweet Cynic, when I say that Ferran will have his final chance. But should he fail, I will take his head off myself, and you will be lucky if I don't take yours too. Ferron's eyes were stuck to the floor, hands nervously twisting the wolf ring around his finger. Look, Cynic said, I only said he's improving. I'm not putting my neck on the line for him or anything. De Guerin stood and walked to the corner of his blackwood desk. It's too late for that, Cynic. But I trust you won't disappoint. You never have before. He sat at the edge of the desk and cradled Ferron's head the way he would a cat. Ferron tried not to shiver. I own you, Ferron. Your happiness, your grievances, your sins. All are my possessions. You need not cling to such foolishness as responsibility for your actions. He caressed Ferron's dirty black hair with a single twirl of a finger. I free you of them. Ferron's eyes remained firmly fixed on the floor, obediently, fearfully. If I rolled a boulder down a hill, and in its descent a girl was crushed to her death, would that stone feel remorse? Neither boy answered. Would the stone be responsible for the death, or would I, the one who pushed it on its way? He pulled on Ferron's chin until their eyes locked. You, Ferron replied simply. The twisted fingers in his hair felt like a knife at the throat. Does a fire burn less brilliantly in remembrance of those it consumes? Does a mountain stand less tall for those it crushes? Does a wolf seek repentance for the children it devours? His volume and tempo rose with each question until his voice reverberated off the stone walls. Like a whip, de Guerin's hand lashed out and struck Ferron's cheek as he yelled, Why, then, does a slave shirk his potential over the guilt of sins that are not his? Cold pain flooded the left side of Ferron's face, and blood trickled from the corner of his eye as it squeezed shut. Your actions, like your soul, are not your own. You are my property. De Guerin punctuated the words. I command you. Do I not also assume the responsibility for my actions? His voice grew soft again. You are my boulder, dear apprentice. I relieve you of the guilt of my sins. Can you find no joy in that? Ferron did not answer. You were nearly a corpse when I found you, Ferron. A forsaken thing in rags and chains. Cast aside, forgotten. Only my interference preserved you. He tugged on Ferron's chin again, noticing the thin trail of blood as if for the first time. He wiped it with a thumb, smearing it more than anything. With a curious expression, he looked at the blood, then popped the thumb into his mouth. Ferron couldn't resist the shiver this time. Slowly, deliberately, de Guerin ran a finger along Ferron's collar, pulling the shirt away to reveal a dark, inky brand just above his heart. He stared at it for a moment, eyeing the snake turned back on itself, eating its own tail over a tree with deep roots. For all the dead gods care, you are a corpse, Ferron. I am your god now, and I will give you one more chance, one final chance, to prove that you're worth something to me. Ferron clenched his teeth. I can do it, he lied. Anything. De Guerin brushed his wet thumb into the smear of blood again. Good. Then do not deny me your talents, apprentice. He sat back down in the plush velvet chair behind the desk. I have been patient with you, more patient than I am with most, and more patient than I should be. But my temperance wears thin, Ferron. Release yourself from your childish inhibitions while I still believe you can. His palm slapped the table like a gavel. Good. Now where is the old man's money? Cynic jumped into motion as if he had been waiting for this moment. He tossed a small purse toward de Guerin, which he caught and hefted. Is this all? He asked. That's it, Cynic confirmed. Cleaned him out good. De Guerin nodded, trusting Cynic's word. He reached in and selected a few gold coins, and tossed the pouch back to the stubble-faced youth. For your excellent work. He winked. Cynic smiled. You see, Ferran, what happens to those who show loyalty? They are rewarded. He tousled Cynic's rough blonde hair as if he hadn't just been threatening him. Ferran became aware of a figure blocking the torchlight behind him, and turned to see a silhouette darkening the entrance to De Guerin's underground offices. Aha! De Guerin exclaimed. And here is an example of the Oathbreakers, if you need it, Ferran. Come in, Jackal. A tall man with deceptively slender arms and dark skin native to the people of Caor entered the round marble chamber. His black eyes were massively dilated. In his left hand, he held a torch aloft. In the right, he gripped a disheveled mass. Ferran's gut turned to ice as it met torchlight. A dirty, severed head, grasped by a handful of long, blonde hair, dangled from Jackal's fist. Liuel. Ferran had met her only a few months back, when she had first been brought to the guild. He didn't know how she came to be here, except that someone had saved her life and given her a brand. They had sparred with training knives a few times before she became despondent. He looked away. Jackal addressed De Guerin with his slow but smooth speech. She made it all the way to the surface, Lord De Guerin. I received a tip from the guards, who said she had many stories to tell. His voice was joyless, nearly monotone. De Guerin sighed, shaking his head. The Blackwood guards are ours. I tell them this, yet they always seem to try. Do they not believe me? Do you not believe me? He asked Ferran. When I say the guards in this city and I have an understanding. He didn't seem to expect a response because he turned back to Jackal. Anyway, very good, dear Jackal. I suppose I should pay you, shouldn't I? For services rendered and all that. He slid one of the gold coins from Galvin's safe onto the desk. A kingpence. A fortune by itself. Jackal slid the torch into a sconce to pocket the coin. De Guerin spoke again as his assassin turned to leave. Be sure to add her to the collection. The others are getting lonely down there. Jackal turned and exited De Guerin's offices, heading down the hallway to an enormous bridge beyond it, where he carelessly threw the head over the side. A few seconds passed before a distant splash was heard. Ferran shivered, keeping his eyes on the ground. Liuel had been his friend, or at least one of the few who seemed to understand his struggle in De Guerin's service. She couldn't have been more than 15 years old, 2 years younger than himself. Ferran twisted the silver ring around his finger in nervous repetition, the scream in his mind growing louder to match his swelling anxiety. The newly indoctrinated often sought escape, and Ferran had too, but he'd seen too many slaves return as heads without bodies to harbor that dream any longer. None could escape De Guerin's influence, or Jackal's blade at least. Options were clear and few in the Brotherhood. Obey, or die, as your neck left your body. Where was I? De Guerin resumed. Ah, that's right. I was discussing incentive. He pressed a few silver coins into Ferran's palm. His other hand gripped Ferran's shoulder, and he leaned in close, whispering, Give me your loyalty, Ferran, without inhibition, and I will make you rich and comfortable as you can imagine. Deny me, and you will die for nothing, as you would have all those years ago on the ice. The guildmaster released his shoulder and stepped away. Leave me now, was all he said, and they did. Outside of De Guerin's offices, they crossed a guarded suspension bridge and entered the heart of the caverns. Torches cast thin spheres of light along the pathways, hiding the unknown heights and depths of the extensive cave network. Somewhere far below, Ferran could hear running water like a subterranean river. The caves were broad, deep, and well protected. Keeping his eyes down, Ferran headed north toward the apprentices' quarters. Thieves, killers, and worse made their homes here in the true underbelly of the city, as long as they swore themselves to de Garen's rule and paid his taxes. Ferran and Cynic entered the long cavern, and Cynic, characteristically, took the lead. The true floor of the cave was often shrouded in a darkness far below the extensive, thick rope bridges that spread throughout the caves. Bolted and tethered to the stone walls at frequent intervals, the bridges were sturdy, and rarely moved noticeably when tread on. Ferran did not know how long they had stood, but they were obviously ancient. It probably stretched back to the beginning of the guild itself, which was likely spawned by the early formation of a city long ago, like how a corpse spawns maggots and carrion eaters. Once they were safely out of earshot, Cynic said, "Well, that was disgusting." "Liul?" "No," Cynic said flatly. "I mean this plank in the boardwalk. Of course I'm talking about snowing Liul. How many severed heads do you see that you need clarification?" "She only wanted to be free," Ferran said. "Free to what? Work her fingers to the bone for the nobility and merchants? Free to freeze in the winter? Free to starve?" "Free to make her own choices," Ferran countered. "No," Cynic said. "That's what she ran from. Luxury, easy money, freedom from her station. She went from being one of the lucky few who get to spit in the nobility's eye to spoiling my appetite." "Her family was killed, Cynic." "Then she really didn't stand a chance without the guild, did she?" Ferran shook his head. "Regular life isn't nearly so bad as you make out." "You were privileged," Cynic argued. "You would say that." Ferran didn't argue. He hadn't exactly felt privileged growing up, but his mind was hardly on the argument. "Still," he said, "not everyone is cut out for this work. Stop your whining. You're here now, and with that brand on your neck, that's not going to change. You might as well make the most of it." Ferran didn't respond. There was no point. Even Cynic, who generally understood his discomfort with a crime, would argue that he was being foolish and unrealistic. "That's where you're headed, you know." Ferran didn't ask for an explanation. "Your lonely head making its way toward a little splash and finding a new home next to Liul's. I don't want to talk about it." "Not necessarily true," Cynic quipped. "You just don't want to talk, period. Ever. It's like you're a statue. A statue carved by a particularly untalented artist, but that's beside the point." Ferran ignored the left-handed remark. "You always change the subject or refuse to talk at all, and it's becoming a problem." Ferran attempted to wave away his words, but Cynic persisted. "You don't take contracts unless de Garen forces one on you, and even then you won't take large jobs at all. De Garen's patience is wearing thin. No, don't shrug at me like that. You know it is. Sooner than later, de Garen will realize you aren't going to change. Fishing mud pence from the city wells and picking a few bronze pieces from the pockets of nobles profits him and you nothing. If you don't start taking bigger jobs..." He paused and then ran his finger along his throat. "To the collection you go." Ferran shrugged outwardly, but inside felt hollow. Simple contracts were easy, but paid very little. Bigger contracts... He rubbed the 2 silver pieces de Garen had given him together in his pocket. Bigger jobs paid far better, but extracted a price of their own. The blaze that consumed the large barn still flickered behind his eyes. A few pinched coins here and there were a simple thing, lifted jewelry and heirlooms among them. Still, the contracts de Garen pressured him into with increasing regularity were far more scarring. Underhanded merchants, ambitious nobles, and jealous lovers often found their way to de Garen and the unique services he offered, and their requests were never simple. At the will of de Garen, Ferran had burned businesses and homes, stolen deeds and life savings, and framed innocents for crimes they had not committed, sometimes his own. Directly or indirectly, Ferran knew of at least 3 people who are now dead because of him, one even intentionally. He flinched at the memory. More often than not, the jobs that paid the best ended in lives or livelihoods ruined, and each one raked at his soul, despite what de Garen might say. He rubbed the coins between forefinger and thumb. 2 coins for him, A lifetime gone for Galvin. Physically, it had been easy. Undoing someone else's life work only took around 15 minutes, but his heart ached each time he thought of it. It was the kind of slanted irony that made Cynic laugh. Ferran's stomach twisted. It was better when he didn't see their faces, and best when he didn't know them at all. Easier to pretend that way. But this time he wasn't so fortunate. He remembered Galvin's face, illuminated by the fire that ravaged his livelihood. What's worse was that Galvin had been a friend of his father's, or as close to a friend as any besides Ulrich. Shame twisted his gut as he thought of his father. What would Boren say if he saw him now? If he knew the things he'd done? For a short moment, Ron risked holding his eyes closed and remembered the heat of flames. Bright fire flickered on wooden walls, and the scream grew louder, more present. He sighed and forced his eyes open, taking off the silver ring with a curse. Only for a few minutes. His mind grew quiet as the ring entered his pocket, and his eyes stayed open. Cynic raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. In the depths of his internal struggle, he had forgotten Cynic was there. "Why do you even care?" Ferran muttered. "Oh dear, are you referring to yourself?" Cynic asked, practically dripping with sarcasm. "By the dead gods, no. No, I hate you. See, I just thought maybe if I gave you some nice advice, you might tip me or something." When Ferran didn't laugh, he continued. "Look, it's not weird that I want you to keep your head, all right? Nobody in this snowing cave can drink anything like you can, and I'd be remiss to lose my drinking companion." "The world is your drinking companion, Cynic." The older boy grinned. "So, are we going to the tavern, then? There's something new I've been wanting to try, and I think Liul's finally given me the courage to do it." Ferran shook his head. 2 silver coins was generous pay for the contract on Galvin's farm, compared to what de Guerin usually gave him at least, but not so generous that he could both squander it and pay his monthly dues. With what he'd managed to scratch together, he could avoid any more contracts for a few weeks, but that meant hungry nights and no drinking. It would be uncomfortable, but the guilt of his crime was fresh. He deserved to be hungry for a few nights. "No," he finally answered. "I just want to be alone right now." It was a hard thing to say. The tavern meant that for a while, however short, he could forget, drink himself into passivity, and maybe pretend he was somewhere else, someone else. "You're not thinking about that snowing sister of yours again, are you?" Screams. Ferran flinched. "Leave me, Cynic." Cynic shook his head and departed down the adjacent walkway, mumbling to himself. "Looks like you bloody well need a drink to me," Ferran heard. "Cynic?" Ferran called hesitantly. The older boy turned to listen. "Thank you, I suppose." Cynic turned back down the hall and shoved a crooked thumb in the air in response. As he lost sight of his friend down the side passage, he leaned hard against the heavy rope and massaged his temples with thumbs. Hadria's scream rang in his mind more today than it had in months. Fire had a way of doing that. Galvin's contract had opened a painful scar. Am I mad? The familiar thought rang inside his head. Why do I still hear you? Is my punishment not enough? Unsurprisingly, the massage did not help. His head always throbbed these days. The screaming was part of it, certainly, but also lack of sleep. A full night's rest was hard to come by when flames waited in the darkness. Each night, when he managed to find sleep through the heat, his dreams were always the same. Memories, nightmares, screams. More than a few times, Ferran had screamed himself to wakefulness, sweating and panting, only stopping when reality returned to him. It wasn't much better. Drinking could let him forget all that, if only for a time. He could forget Galvin and de Guerin, Hadria and the white-haired man Sadagon. White North he needed to forget. He clenched the massive ropes of the bridge until his knuckles turned white. Would it be worth another job? Could he even make himself go through with it? The memory of Galvin's face hovered in his mind, bearing the look of decades lost. He couldn't force it away. He even saw the glint of firelight in the old man's eyes. Flashes of memory from another time came to him. Images of thick log walls and a tavern full of men. Images of a sister and a pile of coins. Images of Galvin's head of thin white hair adding to Hadria's pile. Screams. Screams among fire. Clenching his teeth, he pulled at the rope suspending the wooden bridge. Years ago, when he still hoped of escape, Ferran had spent uncounted hours wandering the massive dark cavern and branching tunnels like an artery. Many sections of the cave had dusty rock floors, while the rest were fortified with these massive rope bridges. He used to drop rocks from the bridges to gauge the cave's depths and find what hid below. Most spots had rocky bottoms that clacked sharply against his falling stones, and a few bridges were suspended over bodies of water, but this spot was different. Here there seemed to be no bottom at all. No distant clicks of stone or splashes of water could be heard, no matter how carefully he listened or how big of a rock he dropped. Here he imagined a bottomless pit of eternal black where one could fall forever. He realized with both hands on the thick rope that this was where he had unconsciously chosen to stop, above that bottomless pit. He stared longingly into the endless darkness. It wasn't stone or water that hid far below. It was something else entirely. Something more inviting, though he wasn't quite sure why. In any case, the complete dark called to him, and he stared down in answer. The blackness did not know. It did not care. It did not feel. Standing here, in such dangerous proximity, Ferran felt more able to not care. Pain and joy, if there were any of the latter, slipped away together, replaced by an empty void. Emptiness, Ferran thought, was far preferable to pain. He remembered a time when he'd hoped for a bright future with him and his twin together. That child was dead now. He had become a shadow, a husk of who he had once hoped to be. Instead of joy and love, he brought only pain and bitterness. How long had it been since he'd felt something as sweet as emptiness? That's what waited below, he finally realized. Nothingness. Oblivion. Maybe there was another way to find release from his awful reality. Another way to escape de Guerin and his awful cave. Ferran stared into the depths, keening for its numbness. Deeper and deeper he gazed, with a growing hunger, until a voice screamed in his ears, shocking him back to consciousness. The ring was on his finger again. Far below, the promise of numbness whispered to him, and he felt goosebumps crawl across his neck and arms. Hath's grave, he thought. I need a drink.